You can take a seat. Thank you, worship team. Well, it's weird. We're like lopsided today. I'm going to preach here. You're getting ignored, evidently, because there's more people over here. They clap. They don't like you guys. How about that? All right, well, I made a major announcement in first service. I'll make it in this service. I decided this on my own, unilaterally, with no other input. I decided it on Wednesday night into Thursday into Friday. We are starting Mosaic Miami, and I expected a bigger response than that. That's all right. We will be accepting applications for the launch team to get away from the incessant snow. By the way, legit, I think this is the first Sunday where it hasn't snowed like Saturday night into Sunday this year. I really do think that. Thank you, Jesus. Pastor, you guys don't understand the prayers pastors pray about weather when it comes to that. Because it's like a thing, like when we decided to bump the worship night, so the worship night's this Wednesday, you didn't miss it, it's still coming. But we talked about it, and I was like, it doesn't even matter if the snowstorm hits at that time, just the fact that it might hit at that time is going to cause people to not come. So we know that if it's snowing, raining, or sunny, people might not come to church. So, sorry, that's that pastor thing. So we are starting a brand new series today called Relentless. So if this is your first time here, perfect Sunday to come because we're kicking something off. By the way, if this is your first time here, we're really excited that you're here. Relentless, and it's going to be about a pretty famous story in the Bible, the story about a guy named Jonah. And I always hesitate with stories like this because they're pretty well known. So even if you didn't grow up in church, even if you don't have much of a religious background, you probably know about Jonah, right? Matter of fact, I'm guessing that lots of people in here have a children's book somewhere in their house about Jonah, right? Jonah and the whale, a whale of a tale, something stupid like that. And let me make fun of that book for a minute, because if you have it, here's what I'm guessing is in it. There's an animated Jonah who in the beginning, he's all grumpy, and God tells him to do something, and he doesn't do it, right? And he runs the other way, and then God's grumpy, right? So he sends a whale, like a nautical hall monitor, right, to go gobble Jonah up, go in the wrong direction, and then spit him out, go in the right direction. And then here's the moral of your children's story. You better listen to God, or a sea creature is going to eat you. Good night, I hope you were good today, sweetie, right? That's essentially what it is. And I want to say that is a horrible interpretation of the story, for one. For two, it's really, if your perception of Jonah and the whale is a children's story, man, it's just so much deeper than that. This is a story about a guy who was complicated, emotional, at times suicidal, and who really struggled to do the thing that God called him to do. It's a story about how God interacts with broken people in a broken world. Really complex. It's a story about a relentless God who pursues the people he loves. So I love this story, and man, I'm just so excited to share this. We're only gonna do the first 3 verses today, and here's why. Because we have an awesome kids ministry downstairs. One of the teachers' name is she in here? Jen Langos. There she is. Okay, so Jen, she's the sweetest teacher we have. She's all of 4 foot nothing. She is. She's awesome. She's little, and she threatened my life this morning. She said, she looked at me, because she was downstairs first, she looks at me, she goes, 10 o'clock. And that's all she said, and I knew the threat was built into that. So it was like 5 over. We were not bad. And I have gone over the past 2 times. I still blame Jonathan, but it's all right. So we're only going to do 3 verses today, and Steve put a giant timer up in the back to mock me, so whatever. I know you. It wasn't there first service. You think I'm just focused on this, but I see all this stuff through the fog. I'm starting this thing, I don't know if you've noticed this year, where I'm just kind of letting my brain go. And it's gotten me into a little bit of trouble so far, but it is way more fun. So I'm just going with it. All right, Jonah, chapter 1, verse 1, super short little verse. The Lord gave this message to Jonah, son of Amittai. So, kind of introduces our character here, guy named Jonah. We're told that God gave him a message, actually an important little bit of information there, because that means that Jonah is what the Bible calls a prophet. He's a prophet. And there's a lot of misconceptions, I think, about what a prophet is. A lot of people think that a prophet is somebody who tells the future. And that's a part of it, but a lot of times in the Bible, it's not about foretelling, it's about forthtelling, which all that means is that they say what God said. So that's really the job of a prophet, is to hear what God is saying and say it to whoever God says to say it to. He's a mouthpiece of God. So that's Jonah's job. Now, little brief history on the Book of Jonah, and this is the academic part. I'll talk fast, so if you hate history and stuff. The Book of Jonah is one of the 12 what's called minor prophets in the Old Testament. All that means is that they're shorter books, not longer. It's not that they're not important. Jonah, though, is unique among these 12. Out of the 12, Jonah is the only book that contains a story rather than just the message that God gave the prophet. It's kind of cool. So all the other prophets pretty much write down the thing that God said to say. Jonah tells the story around the thing God told him to say, which is important because actually, when it comes to being a prophet, Jonah's message that he goes and shares is, in the Hebrew, it's only 5 words long. He says, hey, God's going to destroy this city. You guys suck, essentially was the message that he tells them. Again, five words in the Hebrew. I said a few more than that. But we wouldn't get a lot out of that, right? So the story, what we kind of see from that is that the story is the message, that this story has built into it these lessons that Jonah wants to see. And here's the other thing that's really important. Many scholars believe that Jonah himself wrote the book of Jonah. And that's really important because he's like not a good guy in this story, right? Like if you know the story, and most people read through chapter 1 and then they kind of stop. But chapters like 2, 3, and 4, he's like not painted as good. He doesn't even end in a good place. It's not like the happy ending with the little bow at the end and everything's great. He actually ends in kind of a bad place. But I think that tells us something, that Jonah's putting his mistakes on display because he wants us to learn from them. So it's a really, really cool, I think, like I said, deep story. So Jonah is a prophet. Verse 2, here's God's message. Get up and go to the great city of Nineveh and announce my judgment against it, because I have seen how wicked its people are. So this is the second thing that kind of makes Jonah unique, is he's sent to a foreign city. Most prophets in the Bible are sent to Israel. They're sent to Israel to tell Israel, hey, you guys are screwing up, or hey, this is what God says. Jonah's sent well outside of Israel's borders to Nineveh, capital city of Assyria. And just so you know, this is important for later, that is like an enemy of Israel. He is being sent to like the bad guys in the story. He's being sent to a nation that is not kind to his people. And they were really bad. At their peak, they conquered a good chunk of the known world, but they were ruthless. Their tactics were grotesque. I want to read you, to give you kind of an idea of that, an excerpt of a journal from an Assyrian commander around the time of Jonah. They had diaries back then. So he's writing Dear Diary here. Just imagine a very gruff-looking, very strong man. Dear Diary, that's what he's going to do here. Here's what he says. I slew 260 fighting men. It's a lot. I cut off their heads and made pyramids with them. That's gross. I slew one of every 2. Okay, Thanos. It's weird. I built a wall before the great gates of the city. I filleted the chief men of the rebels. I covered the wall with their skins. Some of them were enclosed alive in the brick walls. I'm reading faster because I realize there's children here. Some of them were crucified. I'm just going to mumble. Something about heads, something about pierced bodies. It's gross, okay? It's gross. It's gross. Before I read that in first service, I checked if there were kids, and then I just realized that. Ask your parents later. Horrible stuff. Like, really, really bad. Now, you might be saying, how did they get away with stuff like that? That's so bad. But you got to keep in mind, back then, they were the sole superpower. There was no one who could contest them. And there was no it wasn't a democracy. People weren't going to speak. It was an empire. It was a monarch. There were no rules of war. There was no Geneva Convention. There was no cameras keeping them accountable, watching what they were doing. There was no UN resolutions, no international law. There was not going to be some war tribunal after the whole thing was over. They feared nothing. No one there to stand up to them. No one there to call them on this except a prophet of the Most High. So God says, hey, Jonah, go tell them that's not right. Go tell them they're wicked, right? And I kind of wanted to prove to you, hey, God says they're wicked. They're wicked. They're messed up. And God picks Jonah to be the guy to go tell them that's not right. You guys shouldn't be doing that. Not a great assignment. Can we just be honest about that? That's not like, oh man, God, I'm so happy you picked me to be the one to go tell the head pyramid guy that he's doing something wrong. Like that's not some. I'm not like volunteering for that. Jonah got drafted into this, and you know, right? You know how he responds. This is one of the most famous parts of the story. This is the final thing that makes Jonah unique among the prophets. Verse 3. But Jonah got up and went in the opposite direction to get away from the Lord. He went down to the port of Joppa where he found a ship leaving for Tarshish. He bought a ticket and went aboard, hoping to escape from the Lord by sailing to Tarshish. Now, this is an interesting verse. It was one of the things that struck me yesterday as I was kind of going over this again, because when I read the thing about Nineveh and how wicked they are, and then if I really know how wicked they are, if I do a little bit of research to find out how bad the Assyrians were, when you read this verse, like, but Jonah got up and went in the opposite direction to get away from, I would have assumed Nineveh, right? Wouldn't you have assumed that's what he's going to say? He's going to say to get away from those people that God's telling me to go talk to, but that's not what it says. It says get away from the Lord. And I think the only way Jonah writes that is in reflection. Like he's got some distance between him and that decision, and he's able to be really honest about it, because I don't know about you, but when I make decisions that are like wrong in the moment, I have a lot of really good reasons for making them, and I can give you a list, itemized list of why I'm making the wrong decision, and it's usually my wife's fault. Is she in here? She's not. Okay, I'm safe. Until later when I come back and realize that I did something wrong. So I really feel like this is Jonah reflecting back going, I wasn't running from Nineveh, I was running from God. I was running from God in this story. So this does make him unique. I mean, not that every prophet was super excited about their assignment, but he straight doesn't listen. A prophet who won't speak, a man of God who wants to be far from God, a mouthpiece of the Most High who wants to keep that mouth shut. He's a walking contradiction, a rebel, revolting, running. He doesn't make any sense. And that's why I say he's complicated. Now, there's an easy preacher application here. This is a fastball down the middle. This is an uncontested layup. This is a wide open receiver in the back of the end zone for me as a preacher, because you know what I can do here, right, with this story. I mean, I can look at it and say, okay, so Jonah, he was given something by God to do, and he ran from God. In what area of your life are you running from God, right? This is the sermon you've heard every time you've ever heard about Jonah, right? Jonah rebelled against God. What area of your life are you rebelling against God? I could dunk on you right now. You would deserve it, right? I could do that. I kind of need to. If I have to play the role of prophet, I have to ask the same kind of questions. But before we do anything like that, what I want to do is I want to reframe this a little bit. Because I learned something this week about the book of Jonah. And that's crazy to say for me. I'm not trying to be like cocky, like I know everything there is to know about the Bible. Not really. But when I get into a story that's this familiar to me, I kind of do go in with I understand this thing. I kind of got it down. But man, this week I was doing some reading and stuff, and I learned something about the book of Jonah. And I was really, like at first, I'll be honest, when I found the thing out, I thought, who cares? This doesn't, like the thing I was reading, the guy was like harping on this thing. I'm like, dude, this is not an important point to be making. Get on with it. But then I realized, oh, wait, man, there are some deep implications of this thing. So I got really excited. There's a deep lesson right in the first 3 verses. As a matter of fact, it's in the first verse of Jonah. There's a deep lesson there. It's actually the first word in the book of Jonah. Now, not the translation we just use. We just use called the NLT, the New Living Translation. It's my favorite one to suggest to people because it's pretty conversational in tone. It's still pretty faithful to the original language. But in this case, the first word is the, and that's not the word that I'm talking about today. Most English translations don't have this word in the first verse. But really important, the first word in the Hebrew is the word and. And. A-N-D. Now, when you see that, probably like me going, okay, dude, who cares? You're not having a deep spiritual experience right now looking at this word, are you? Is your life changing? Keep looking at it. Maybe something will happen, right? At first, it didn't seem to matter. It's an insignificant word. It's a connector. Matter of fact, the reason your English translation probably doesn't even acknowledge that it exists is because this word in the Hebrew is always attached to another word. It never stands on its own. It's always connected to another word. And that is kind of what sparked the deep thought. The word and here is incredibly significant because the word and is not the way you start a story. The word and is the way you continue a story. The word and is not the way you start, it's the way you continue. So the word and at the beginning of Jonah's story tells us something about Jonah's story. That Jonah's story is not meant to be understood on its own. The word and tells us that Jonah is a part of a larger story. You cannot understand Jonah in isolation. The word and connects Jonah to something bigger than Jonah. You start the story with the word and. So, I think a lot of people have some wrong assumptions about the Bible. And I can break them up into some different categories. And some people think that the Bible's kind of like a fantasy book, like made up stories, kind of cool, maybe have some moral lessons in them. But by and large, it's just make-believe. It's just stories that are made up. And I think a lot of people think fantasy book. Some people, and this is kind of the opposite, or maybe not, some people kind of think of the Bible as a spell book, like a how-to for miracles, like a miracles for dummies, And listen, here's what I mean, and you might not, maybe you're not catching it, but I think a lot of people think if I just do this, this, and this, then God will do this. If I say this just this right way, or if I do this thing just the right way, then this will happen in my life. And it really does turn out to be almost like this superstitious, almost like voodoo type thing. Like if I just say these words just the right way, boom, this magical thing will happen. And I want to say that's not the right way to view the Bible either. The most common way, though, I think that people view the Bible is just a book of do's and don'ts, a rule book. How not to piss God off for dummies, something like that, right? Some of you think I just did by saying that word. Second service, you guys are cooler than first service, right? They judged me. You wouldn't do that. This is a side note, I judge a curse word by whether or not my mom said it, and she says that word, so I'm allowed to say it. It's your fault, Mom. That's the only bad thing she's ever said. She's very nice. I think those are all the wrong ways to view the Bible. The right way to view the Bible is that it is a story, and not like a story, but the story, capital T, the story. The grand story of God interacting with humans over history. So I don't know how much you know about the Bible, but the Bible is actually a collection of 66 books in one. And these 66 books were written over the span of thousands of years between some of these books. And they were written by all different kinds of people. It wasn't like one type. It wasn't like a bunch of priests throughout the ages writing it. That's not at all what it is. Man, you got farmers, you got shepherds, you got kings, you got cupbearers, you got doctors, you got tent makers, you got fishermen, you got all different kinds of people writing these 66 books. And yet, even with the diversity of time periods, the diversity of circumstances, the diversity of personalities, these authors all write one cohesive story over the span of thousands of years. That by itself is a miracle. I just read something this week, I think it was Twitter. I'm back on Twitter. Yay. Where a woman actually converted from Wiccan, and that was her big one of the things that God used to kind of break her heart open was, as she read the Bible, she couldn't believe that over the span of all this time, they were writing this very consistent story. So, at the risk of a massive oversimplification, I want to try and give you a Cliff Notes version of the entire Bible. We'll be here till 4 o'clock. I'm just kidding. I will go try to give you 66 books in 66 seconds. That's an exaggeration, but I'll try to go really fast. We'll start way over here. So in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and it was good, right? Then he creates humans. Very good. Part of the very good in the beginning with humans is he built in a choice. He allowed them to choose God or not God, right? This is a huge part in the very first couple of chapters. God or not God? Do you want to live your life with God, or are you going to try and find fulfillment and happiness without him? You know the story, you're living in it. They chose not God, right? So they eat the fruit that they weren't supposed to eat, and things crumble. That choice right there was of cosmic proportions. They chose not God, and it broke things. It broke creation. It broke the human soul, and it broke our relationship with God. That choice, cannot be overstated. It was huge. But here's the crazy part. Right here in the very beginning, they screw it up 5 seconds in. But immediately, God had a plan to heal the thing that was broken. Instead of wiping the slate clean, instead of saying, let's start over, he says, all right, I'm going to lean in, and I'm going to start to redeem this thing. I'm going to start to heal this thing. And he has this plan because we have a God who just doesn't want to give us what we deserve, doesn't want to give us what we deserve. So he chooses to work through people. He wants to redeem this thing, and he picks this grand story kind of starts as he picks Abraham and Isaac and Jacob because he's going to start to work through them. And they're supposed to be like this, they're on this mission to push back darkness and try to reconnect people with God, and he works through them. And then it's the nation of Israel, and you see God just relentlessly working through history, trying to pursue people and bring them to him until you get to the climax of history, which is Jesus. Jesus comes down to earth, God made man, God putting on human flesh and becoming one of us. And he, 2,000 years ago, lived the life that they were supposed to live way back here. He chose God. He chose the right choice at every turn in his life. He lived the life we were meant to live. And then he died for us. He lived the life we were supposed to live, and he died the death we were supposed to die in our place for our sin. And that is the most important thing that ever happened. And 3 days later, he didn't stay dead. That's the essence of our faith, Christians. If you're a Christian, you believe not just that he died, but that he didn't stay dead, that he rose from the dead. And then he then begins to work through Christians, through people who have faith in him, because this message of sacrifice, this message of forgiveness that now we can have, he can heal that relationship that was broken with God all the way back there, that can be healed, that we can now live in purpose and forgiveness and have a relationship with our Creator. Now he picks the church now he wants to work through us to continue to get this message of sacrifice and forgiveness out to the world. And now we're, 2,000, I think we're here on the timeline. We're here. And we're supposed to be continuing to share that message and build his kingdom, right? He said, go into all the world and make disciples. Essentially, tell people about him and teach them to live like he lived. That's all that is. And then the Bible continues. Believe it or not, the Bible goes past where we are now. And I don't know where. I don't know. It might go out to you, Matt. Hopefully it's here, right? The end, when Jesus actually comes back again. I don't... Christians always get caught up in that. What's it going to be like? I don't know. The book of Revelation is really confusing, okay? I'm a pastor and I still don't quite get it. There's a lot of stuff in there, but we know he comes back, and we know that at the very end of all things, man, he's gonna come and he's gonna wipe every tear. He's gonna right every wrong. And the Bible even talks about this idea that like he's gonna make it as if bad things become untrue. Somehow the creator of the universe is gonna roll this thing back and just make everything right. And that's how it ends. You should be excited about that. First service clapped. You guys aren't as cool. So that is the grand story. The Bible, believe it or not, contains all of human history from the very beginning to the very end. So, Jonah's story, which is somewhere in here on the timeline, Jonah's story is just a piece of this larger story. This larger story tells a story of a God who just relentlessly pursues the people he loves throughout the entire human history. Jonah and the word of the Lord came to Jonah, because Jonah is supposed to be a continuation of this story. So, this is important. Instead of viewing these verses that we just read as Jonah disobeying God, they are, and he is. But I think it's better to understand these verses as Jonah rejecting the story that God was writing over his life and trying to write his own story. Because that's really what's happening here. Jonah is pulling the divine pen out of God's hand, and he is attempting to write his own chapter. God said, go do this. God said, hey, Jonah, participate in this thing I'm doing. And Jonah's like, I'm good. I'm going to go do my thing, God. That's your thing. I'm going to do my thing. That's essentially what Jonah just said. He wants to do what he wants to do. He does not want to participate in this grand narrative that God is writing. There's this song, super popular right now on the Christian radio, called Homecoming by Corey Asbury. I don't know if you've heard it. You probably, if you remotely listen to Christian radio, have heard it, because it's like every other song right now, which is cool because it's a good song, but then it's immediately not a good song because they play it too much. I don't know if you guys have that experience, but I'm like, I like it, now I hate it. But one of the opening lines to this song is really profound. It says this: Lord, I confess I've been a criminal. I've stolen your breath and sang my own song. I love that. That's like deep. Because it kind of speaks to this grand cosmic narrative, because what the Bible tells us way back here when God created Adam is that God breathed his breath into Adam, and that's the thing that gave Adam life. So this idea is that we live off of God's breath. And I love the idea that, hey, we're taking God's breath and we're doing what we want. God wants us to sing a certain kind of song, and we're singing our own song. And that we're essentially stealing because it's not ours to use how we want. So, spoiler alert. It doesn't go well for Jonah. You know that, right? The whale thing just gets him. Jonah trying to write his own story does not go the way Jonah wants it to go. And we'll see more of that next week. But here's what I want to do. I want to give you 3 takeaways for 3 verses. 3 takeaways for 3 verses. First one, I had a friend of mine a couple weeks ago challenge me that leaders ask good questions. I'm talking about leadership and how one of the defining qualities of a leader is that they ask good questions. They ask different questions than maybe a follower would ask. And I really liked the concept. It kind of bored its way into my brain. But I was thinking about this story, and I thought, man, I think sometimes we get caught up in our lives trying to find answers to questions, and we get so caught up in trying to find the answer, we never stop to ask, is this even the right question? Right? So that's a really big thing, I think. I could challenge you with that alone. Are you asking the right questions in your life? Because if you're asking the wrong questions, you're spending a whole lot of work getting answers that don't matter. So are you asking the right questions? So I think in this case, though, one of the primary examples is around the idea of purpose in your life. We want to know our purpose. As a pastor, I interact with so many people where this is like almost a haunting question. What is my purpose in life? What is my purpose? And I don't dislike the question, why am I here? Why was I born? Why did God create me? Or if we wanted to put it in our context today, what is my story? Right? What is my story? And if you ask that question, by the way, I'll take that. Because that question does inherently back you up, right? Out of that grind of where your face is this close to your life and you're living moment to moment, day to day, week to week, where you just kind of think about, I got, 5 days until the weekend and then I get to have fun and like that, what is my story pushes you away from that weekly grind and you ask, what is my story? That's good. I'll take that. You need to back up away from your life and ask the question, what is being written here? If I continue on this path, what does it look like? Good. But I do think there's a better one. And I'll steal it from Tolkien. His character, Samwise Gamgee, asks a better question. He asks in The Lord of the Rings, I wonder what sort of tale we've fallen into. Remember that if you're a fan? He asks, I wonder what sort of tale we've fallen into here. This is a really cool question because what Sam knew, instead of asking, what's my story, Sam's like, hey, I just kind of feel like I'm caught up in something bigger than me. What's this story that's being told? And then what role do I play in this grand narrative that's being written? That's what Sam's asking. And think about it. If Sam had just asked, what's my story? He probably would have done some very different things. But instead he asked, what's the grand story and how do I fit into it? That led him to a different place. And we can take, if you're not a Lord of the Rings fan, let's take that out. And let's put Jonah in instead. Jonah asked the question in the first 3 verses, what's my story? And it led him to the wrong place. It led him to Tarshish. Because he's like, my story doesn't end in Nineveh. I don't want to end up on that pyramid. I don't want to end up built into some wall somewhere. That's not my story. But that was the wrong question. What God was calling him to was to be a part of this grand narrative, to do something with his life that's bigger than him, to give his life to something bigger than him. And if he would have asked, I wonder what sort of tale I've fallen into here, there probably wouldn't be a whale in the story at all. He would have said, okay, Lord, I'm going to go do this thing even though I don't want to, even though I'm scared, even though it's crazy out there. I'm going to go do this because I want to be a part of this masterpiece you're writing over history. I want to play a role in that. So ask the question, what story am I in? What role am I supposed to play? It's a better question. That's the first takeaway, and the second is related to it. If your story starts with the word "and," just like Jonah's story does, that means that you are significant. And I talked about this a couple weeks ago. Some of y'all didn't listen. You didn't believe me, so I'm going to say it again. You are significant. I mean, think about this. If your life begins with the word "and," then God is inviting you into this larger story that He's writing over history. That's crazy. He's saying, hey, I'm writing a masterpiece that spans back thousands of years and goes forward thousands of years, and I want you to be a part of it. Wow. That's crazy. Rather than just asking the question, what's my story? Because then you're the main character of your own story. And you have some value and some worth in that. But if you're supposed to play a role in the story, your worth, your value, your significance just skyrocketed. The choices you make just got heavier. They just got heavier because you're supposed to be writing this thing. The direction of your life just became critical to this thing. I mean, think about that. This grand epic spanning thousands of years, God saving and redeeming and relentlessly pursuing people with love. He wants you to help Him do that. He wants you to build His kingdom on this earth. And have you ever thought about that? You know, the day you were born, I think people always think that story started with your name, but it didn't. It started with the word and. And. That's crazy. And Joey was born. God's writing this story over history. And Hannah was born. And Jason was born. And Shane was born. And Zach was born. And because your stories aren't supposed to stand on their own in isolation. They are a part of this thing. And he's inviting you into that. And your story is attached to that. Just like Jonah, your story can't be understood in isolation. You're asking the wrong question. If you're just asking about you, the reason you haven't come to the right conclusions is because it doesn't work that way. The only way your life has significance is when it's fit into this whole thing. You're asking the wrong question. I actually think every person is born with an innate desire to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And I think that's what you've been searching for. You've been searching for meaning. You've been searching for purpose. You've been searching for a connection to a larger story, something bigger than you. And God's inviting you into that. You're significant. Last takeaway. So God invites Jonah into this story. Let's be honest, in a way that was not appealing. Hey, go to the most powerful, ruthless nation in the world who may kill you and tell them they're messing up. Like, that's not a great assignment. It's not. Jonah says, no, thank you. I do want to ask, is there some areas of your life where God is saying, hey, do this thing, stop doing this thing? If you have the rule book view of the Bible, you're looking at it as do's and don'ts, and God trying to say, don't do this, now you're supposed to do this. Back up away from that for a minute. God's inviting you into his story that he's writing. What if the way he wants you to live is a huge part of that? What if saying no to God in these little things hurts your ability to say yes to God in the bigger things? Because y'all, man, I can't tell you how many times I talk to people who are, I want this grand purpose, but you won't even say yes to the little thing down here. I got to tell you, I think you might need to say yes to the little thing down here before you get access to the grand story of your life. Maybe God just wants to see you say yes every once in a while, just to see where you'll go with the big ones. So what area of your life right now has God been kind of nudging you on? Saying, hey, you need to stop that. Right? You need to start doing that. What area of your life has he been nudging you on? What area of your life is God trying to write a story and you keep pulling the pen out of his hand going, I got this. Take a lesson here from our boy Jonah. It doesn't go well. You're not a good author. You're not. The words of Dr. Phil, how's that going for you? How's that going for you? Maybe you should let God write. Let him write the story. Now, so I guess what I'm saying is there might be some areas of your life where you're screwing up and you need to stop. But here's the other thing. I really strongly feel this, that like I could stand up here and I could go back to like I joked about earlier, that I could dunk on you and be like, whoa, what are you rebelling? Like, you better watch out because here comes the whale. I could. But I got to tell you, I don't think that works. Like, for very long. And I don't know what your church background is, but I used to go to churches where the pastor kind of had a guilt gun. You know, the guilt gun, go, kind of works like that, where he's just trying to make you feel bad to get you to act a certain way. And I know it works a little bit. I could get you to probably be different this week, maybe Monday, possibly part of Tuesday. I could just hammer you until you felt bad enough to try and do something. But I would rather instead say, hey, the God of the universe is writing a story over the entirety of history, and he wants you to be a part of that. I think you being drawn into that story has a way longer shelf life than just guilting you into trying living some certain way. Man, don't you want to be a part of it? What I want to do is I want to inspire a little bit of curiosity in you. Like, I want to be a part of what God is doing on this earth. And if the little things that I'm doing here and there that aren't pleasing to God, if I can just adjust those because I want to be a part of this story, then man, I'll do just about anything to get invited into this thing. I want to know, what is this story that God is writing, and how can I be a part of that? I want to be a part of that. I hope you do too. And here's the last thing that I think might trip you up. is I think a lot of times we have made so many like mistakes in our life, like Jonah. And this is like eyes wide open, right? Jonah, this was not ignorance. Jonah, you know that I think it's probably older now, that TikTok, like I understood the assignment, you know, that little thing. Like Jonah understood the assignment. He is not pleading ignorance here. He knew full well what God wanted him to do, and he ran in the exact opposite direction. Some of you have done that. You've chosen the opposite of what you know God wanted you to do. And here's what happens. Satan uses that to keep you away from God. That now, oh, you've messed up. You got angry God in your head looking down on you, wagging his finger saying, yeah. But the whole story of Jonah kind of tells the opposite of that. That God, actually, we have a relentless pursuing God. That while you were running from God, he was chasing you. Like, that's the crazy part. We talk about being far from God. Good luck trying to outpace him, right? He didn't send a whale as judgment. He sent it because he loved him. He didn't send Jonah to burn Nineveh to the ground. You'll see, even Jonah knew that wasn't why he was supposed to go there. He knew he was going to Nineveh because God loved those people, those evil, wicked people, and he wanted to change them. And that's why Jesus came, to pay for all the things that you've done, to right all those wrongs. So I just want to keep saying this over and over again. Forgive me if this is boring to you, but I get nervous in church where you have a bunch of people who will just say the sentence like, I'm a Christian. And I get people say that to me all the time, like, I'm a Christian. And I always want to ask, like, how do you know? What does that mean? Because I'll have people tell me, like, I've been a Christian my whole life. And I just want to say, well, that's not a thing. Just so you know, forgive me if you think that, or if you've said that before, but like, there's no like genetic code for that. There's no like Christian gene that you were born with. You have to make that decision yourself. I was born into a Christian home, but in first grade, I accepted Jesus into my heart. I did it every day for like a month. I have like 30 Jesuses in my heart right now because of that. But I had to make that choice. At every stage in life, I had to make a choice to say, you know what, I trust in him. And for that first grade level, I was there. And then, again, as I got into middle school and then, in high school and college, you start to make those decisions. Usually everybody has like one of those, I don't know about this. And at every stage, I had to make sure that I was still thinking like, no, this is it. My heart's still there. And I guess I just want to invite you into that. Maybe you've never like made that decision to say, I trust in Jesus. I can't work my way to God. I can't do it. I can't. I need something outside of myself to save me, and that something is Jesus. He came down to earth because you couldn't make your way up to heaven. And that's the essence of Christianity. It separates it out from every other religious system on earth. Christianity says God came down to you, and he offers you forgiveness free. You just got to come to him with hands open. So if you've never made that decision today, man, today is the day. Surrender. Give your life to him. Pray with me. Jesus, what a story. A story you're writing over history, a story you wanted to write with Jonah, and a story you're wanting to write with us, Lord. I pray for every heart in here right now, that thing, Lord, that drawing, that curiosity of, man, I want to be a part of this thing that God is doing over history. Lord, I pray that longing, that hunger would be there for that. And that would be the thing that draws us to live the life you want us to live, not some fear of consequences, some fear of you being angry with us, Lord, but it would be your kindness that draws us into repentance, Lord. And pulled to this grand story. And Lord, I pray for the person sitting here right now who's never like officially accepted you as their Savior. Lord, I pray for them as they sit here. I pray that you would move in their heart, that your Holy Spirit would do something, break something, that they would just say, you know what, I can't do this. I need Jesus. I need a Savior. I need forgiveness. Lord, and I pray right now that they would give their lives to you. And keep your eyes closed. But I just want to say, like, if you've never prayed that kind of prayer, if you've never made that kind of decision, man, I want to invite you into that today. And you can pray this. It can be as simple as, Jesus, I give you my life. You can pray something just as simple as that. Hands open, heart surrendered. I need your forgiveness. You can pray that prayer and you can start a relationship with your Creator right here, right now. And I guess I would just encourage you, if you have prayed that prayer, man, we don't want you to take that step on your own. We want to be a part of that. We want to help you take the first steps after that. So if you've made that decision today, if you've prayed that prayer today, I would just ask that you raise your hand right now so that we can know you were here and know that you made that decision. And if you're the rebellious, embarrassed type that doesn't do that kind of thing, I would beg you to make your way out to the Welcome Center afterwards and let somebody know that you made that decision, because it's the most important decision you'll make. Jesus, we thank you for being here today. We just want to take a couple minutes and just be in your presence here. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.